sense of what it means to become effective as a leader in a public institution in South Africa and beyond. Over to you. Thanks, Program Director.
No, thank you very much, Principal Professor Ngawini. I have to give you credit that you have actually taken the National School of Government to another level. We never really used to know much about the school, certainly those of us who are from outside. And you have taken it to all of us, especially those of us who are outside the government structure. Just recently, there have been murmurings in South Africa as to whether universities are following on the footsteps of the destructive footsteps of some state-owned enterprises. I have to use some because there are some who are doing quite well. The next few days actually marks my last stretch as Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. The 28th of this month is my last day. A valuable exercise in recent months has been to take stock of the achievements and milestones we have made in recent years here at the University of Johannesburg, and to answer whether universities in South Africa are on a destructive path. And of course, as we engage with this question, we know what is happening in our university sector, universities that are under administration, assassinations going on in some universities that we read about, vice chancellors being suspended. One vice chancellor has just been suspended at VUT. Has just been suspended just a few days ago. So it is absolutely very important for us to draw some lessons so that we do not destroy higher education system in South Africa. And of course, when I took over as the University of Johannesburg, and this is probably one of the biggest lessons out of any form of leadership, I actually put a bold vision, and that vision was to make the University of Johannesburg the University of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And of course, as I stepped into the podium and announced this bold vision of making the University of Johannesburg the University of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, many people thought this was impossible. Of course, Nelson Mandela once said, "It is impossible until it is done." And of course, it was through a deliberate and purposeful strategy that University of Johannesburg could transform itself from being a university that was designated to be a comprehensive university that is not research intensive to now the largest producer of research in the country, and to now being ranked second in the continent by the QS rankings, and second in the continent by Times Higher Education Impact rankings, and first in South Africa according to that ranking. Of course, I can't take the gains, the achievements all by myself. I would like to point out that Professor Aaron Rensburg actually laid a very good foundation of innovation and ingraining it as the DNA of the institution. And of course, as we were, and I was there, as we were crafting this bold vision before the Fourth Industrial Revolution, one of the guiding principles was what we would normally term accessible excellence. Because normally excellence is not accessible. Normally excellence is not accessible. If you go and do a BCom degree in any of the big universities in the Cape, it is almost twice. You pay almost twice as much as if you had come to the University of Johannesburg. And therefore, just the cost itself becomes, the costs are excellent. both of them, whether you are in the Cape or whether you are in Johannesburg, they're excellent. But the one that is half cheap is much, much more accessible. So those were some of the issues that we obviously wanted to achieve. So I am going to talk about 15 key lessons I can draw from my tenure as Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. And these are perhaps 5 key reasons why we have managed to be able to succeed as much as we have done. The first lesson that I can talk about is that as leaders, it is imperative to get the right people. Whether it is, well, obviously it has to include competence. It has to include a drive, because you have competent people who are not driven. You have competent people who might not necessarily be interested. In our recruiting strategy at the University of Johannesburg, we emphasize the need for academic leaders, international staff. When I took over, it was 15%. And when I leave now, it is 20%, because you have to bring the world to our campus, and you have to take our campus to the world. And we also introduced the concept of distinguished visitors. Among some of these distinguished visiting appointments included Nobel Prize winner Wally Soyinka. And then obviously, we had a distinct focus on academic development and support. And out of this academic development and support, in 2017, only 48% of our UJ staff actually had PhDs. Just 5 years later, 57% of our staff have PhDs. Similarly, the number of NRF-rated researchers grew from 179 in 2017 to 274 in 2022. Which is a rise of 53%. The second lesson that I can draw from my experience as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, you need to build a financial war chest alongside key stakeholders. For example, UJ annually spends over 10 million on the student meal assistance program for those students who do not have food to eat. This assists approximately 4,600 students monthly. We have also raised close to 2 billion rand since 2016 to assist missing middle students. In addition, since 2009, UJ has made 20 million available yearly to assist financially needy students with their registration fees. This year, we launched the Double Our Future Impact campaign, which aims to help as many as 10,000 students. And so far, we have raised 3 million rands. And most importantly, when I took over, University of Johannesburg had 1.5 billion rands reserves. And as I depart from the University of Johannesburg, that reserves, both council controlled and not council controlled, actually has increased to over 5 billion rands, almost 5 times the amount of money. And obviously, when we talk about reserves, we are talking about money that is not part of our operations. It's money that you bank for rainy days. Thirdly, the third thing that we need to do is to build internal capacity. We have overseen the establishment of institutes. Some of the institutes, Institute for Intelligence System, a research institute for systems intelligence, continuous engineering and cognitive computing in Africa. The other one is the Institute for Future Knowledge, headed by the former Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, Professor Arthur Mutambala, which serves as a cross-disciplinary think tank, and most recently the National Artificial Intelligence Institute, which has been established by the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies and is housed by the University of Johannesburg and the University of Tshwane University of Technology. The fourth thing is to build infrastructure. At the University of Johannesburg, we purchased and financed 2 additional campuses. If you come to the structure that is next to SABC, it used to be called Media 24. It is now called JBS Complex. 15,000 square meters under roof and huge amounts of space that is unused. And of course, not the one under roof, but the empty space that has not yet been built for future expansion. And of course, the 2 Soweto residence complex. And of course, we also had the Devlin campus, which was built, 200 million donated by a friend of mine. Thank you very much, Joy Copeland. And then that is where we are doing with Accenture innovation in Soweto, so that we can bring innovation to our townships and contribute towards reindustrialization of our townships. One of the things that we are doing at that place is to train people in Soweto to be able to service out of the motor plan cars. When you buy Mercedes-Benz, for example, and it is out of the motor plan, you can have accredited people that are accredited by Mercedes-Benz, and that is what we are doing there. So additionally, the fifth thing that we need to do is inculcate the sustainable mindset. Some of the examples that we have done recently, we have just launched a fleet of electric buses. You probably have seen it on the internet, that our buses are now electric. And of course, people say, but you charge them using electricity that is generated by Eskom, and Eskom uses coal to be able to generate that electricity. No. In addition to that, 15% of our electricity at the University of Johannesburg actually comes from solar panels. If you come to our parking lots, the parking lots have become, of course, they are still parking lots, but at the top, these are solar panels. You find them at the Soweto campus, you find them at the APK campus, you find them over the roofs of the buildings at APB campus and in Doornfontein. And of course, our focus is to create a set of graduates that are able to understand the SDGs and what it means, and our contribution to it. The sixth lesson is to build a locally relevant organization, and in our instance, university. It has to be locally relevant, but at the same time, it must have an international outlook. We emphasize internationalization and encourage collaboration. For instance, the Africa by Bus project, which has taken over 15,000 students by bus to Mozambique, to Lesotho, to Eswatini, to Botswana, to Namibia, to Zimbabwe, to Zambia, and to Kampala by bus, is an example of changing our students, especially our local students, to have an international and the continental, obviously in this case, mindset. We have taken a restricted number of people to China, to Brazil, and so on and so forth, but those are small numbers, so that we can inculcate an internationalist mindset. And of course, coming back to the Africa by Bus project, it was because the University of Johannesburg has a Pan-African vision. The seventh lesson that we can learn is to inculcate the culture of reading and writing. There is a statement that I have often said, that those who do not read must not lead, lest they are going to lead us into temptations and deliver us to poverty. An example of this, of inculcating the culture of reading, is the Vice Chancellor's Reading Club. And of course, it later also became the chair of council's reading club. I used to do one, and the chair of council, Mike Take, used to do another one, to instill this culture of reading at UG. And of course, that meant that I had to read a book, and I had to invite staff and students every month to discuss this. The eighth lesson that I can draw from my leadership is that it is vital to lead by example. It was not enough just to launch the various reading clubs. I had to demonstrate that I was reading and I was writing. And of course, I've written 27 books. And one of the things that happened during my vice chancellorship was to move away from just writing about to my specialist researchers to write for the sake of to the general public. Closing the Gap was an example of a book that I wrote for the public. Leadership, from the 50 books I read, and these are the books that I read for the Vice Chancellor's reading club, was another example of that, with a foreword written by our former President Thabo Mbeki. And of course, Leading in the 21st Century was another book that I wrote for the public. Another one was Heal Our World, where our new Chancellor, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, and our former Deputy President of the country wrote the foreword. So it's very important to lead by example. And I have to single out the principal of the National School of Government, because he also leads by example. I read quite extensively the work that he publishes in all sorts of media, whether it is the Daily Maverick, where he's engaged on contemporary issues that require solutions. And that is very, very important for the leader. In fact, one of the things that I follow quite extensively is the reading list that Bill Gates always offer at the end of the year of the books, the 10 books that he read that he absolutely loved. And I've learned quite a great deal out of that. The ninth lesson that I learned here is that as leaders, you have to communicate constantly. And that means that, and one of the things that I introduced was a weekly Vice Chancellor's letter to staff and students. Very, very important. Again, when I was writing op-eds, I was not just writing for the general public, but I was also writing for my staff and students, because I knew they were going to read. In fact, whatever was in the public domain, we always put it on our website. So communication is very, very, very important. And communication is more than verbal. It's more than written. And I was quite active in the social media spaces, because it's a way in which I can reach audiences that I couldn't necessarily reach if I were just to speak to my staff and students. Then the 10th lesson is that when you lead, you have to lead based on your expertise. It is no accident that my vice chancellorship was defined by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I did a PhD in artificial intelligence in 1997 to 2000 at the University of Cambridge. So it's very important that we take the best out of us and project it into all forms of leadership. One example that I can point out is that every student at the University of Johannesburg has to take a compulsory artificial intelligence course. And the students in economics have been thanking me, saying that now, because when they graduate from University of Johannesburg, they have 2 certificates. 1, BCom Economics. 2, certificate in artificial intelligence. And we design it so that when you complete the course, you actually get a separate certificate. They are saying that because of that, they get interviewed first. And people are interested in them because of that. That is one thing about my own expertise that I brought forward for the benefit of our students. And I took it outside into the presidency when I was the leader of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission. I took it to Namibia, where I was also involved in the Fourth Industrial Revolution of that country. I took it to Rwanda, where I was the chairman of the Africa Center of Excellence in Internet of Things. And of course, to the World Health Organization, where we developed ethical guidelines for the use of AI in medicine, because it is happening in our hospitals, which requires us to have new sets of guidelines. I'm actually quite impressed by the principal of the National School of Government and his interest on ChatGPT and what it is going to do to our ability to craft, to employ people to write speeches for us, because we can actually be able to instruct ChatGPT to write things for us. In fact, I was quite impressed. I did not know it could do this when Professor Ngaweni posted a poem about me that he instructed ChatGPT to write about. I was actually quite impressed. And we need to understand these things because it is changing our world of work in a fundamental way. The 11th lesson that I can draw from my leadership is that we have to think out of the box. And in our case, we thought out of the box in our approach to teaching and learning and redefining the curriculum. I've already talked about the compulsory artificial intelligence module. But I will also talk about another thing, the Africa Insight module that we have introduced, which is also compulsory, where we teach African literature, African economy, and African politics to all our students. Because when they go out there to the rest of the African continent, if they don't have the competence of that, it can be costly. I don't have to emphasize how much money MTN paid in Nigeria because they did not understand the political economy of that country. Originally, it was supposed to be 5.5 billion US dollars, and they ended up paying 3.5 billion US dollars. So our graduates must be equipped to be able to understand the political economy of the African continent. And of course, the Africa by Bus project is another way of augmenting that. The Bachelor of Arts in Politics, Economics, and Technology, quite different from PPE, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics, that originated at Oxford. And in fact, when I dreamt about this degree, I was invited to speak at the Oxford Union, and they took me to sign this huge book that has been signed by Malcolm X 2 weeks before he was assassinated, Albert Einstein, and Winston Churchill. And then it dawned to me that the British society was in the middle of a crisis called Brexit, and the prime ministers who are involved in that studied PPE at Oxford. And I felt that the PPE probably has outlived its usefulness. The technology is the biggest driver of our modern life. So that is how I introduced PET, the first in the world such qualification, thinking outside the box. And of course, as we shifted to the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we recruited new set of people to be able to be equal to the task. 48 staff now are working actively on the Fourth Industrial Revolution related subject, and they were recruited in the last 5 years. The 12th lesson, there was no room for the crisis we experience to become a perma crisis. Perma crisis is a new word in the Oxford Dictionary, permanent crisis. And of course, our strategy that always arrested crisis and prevented them from becoming perma crisis has informed much of our approach to one crisis was the failure of governance when I took over, that ended up with the chair of council resigning, and that implicated even the CFO. It was a big crisis for the University of Johannesburg. It could have even been a bigger crisis if we did not manage it well. The other crisis was the pandemic, COVID-19. The University of Johannesburg was the first university to complete the academic year in both years of the pandemic, and was the first university to start the academic year in both years. And of course, I got into trouble because students were saying, no, you have hurried us. If we had been delayed, we would still get NSFAS allowances during December. But for us, it was very simple. We are not prepared to compromise on our efficiency. We want to get people to go out there and work. The 14th lesson that we can learn from my time here is that you need to host prominent events and personalities and decision makers. And I will point out at one of the things that I have attended here at the National School of Government, where I shared a platform with a big thinker from China, a very important economy. And I hope that the people who are there learn from that. That is an example of hosting prominent things. And for us as the University of Johannesburg, we hosted the Leadership Academy for the African Union. We hosted the Nelson Mandela Lecture and many, many other things that we actually hosted. We were the ones who actually advised the Department of Science and Innovation to take a trip to Silicon Valley. And we went to Silicon Valley, and we also advised that we need to go to Zhongguancun, the Chinese version of that, so that we can have a much, much more complete experience on these two fourth industrial revolution superpowers. Then the fifth day, the final recommendation is that we need to learn from other nations. We need to learn from other nations. We need to learn from other organizations. There's this concept that used to be popular at the Harvard Business School. Is called a learning organizations. Our departments must become learning organizations. Learning organizations means they make mistakes. But making mistake is not actually bad. In fact, John F. Kennedy was once quoted as saying that an error becomes a mistake when it is repeated. And the repetition is what we should actually be wary about. So those are my views. And I leave a university that is the leading university in terms of research in South Africa. And as I bow out, I would like to quote William Shakespeare, who once said, "Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them." And of course, I would characterize my tenure at the University of Johannesburg as the confluence of all this, of people who were born great, with people who achieve greatness, and with people whose own greatness was thrust upon them. And none of them, I would say, are better leaders than others. All of them are excellent leaders, and they bring different dimensions to the crucial art of effective leadership. Thank you very much. Ngiyabonga, ngiyalibua, ngiyalibua. Enkosi.
Thank you very much, Prof. Marwala, for a masterclass in leadership. Before you go away, Prof, I want to just tap your memory on lesson number 13. If you can just remind us on lesson number 13, it's the one that comes after the Burma crisis.
Lesson number 13. Do not be afraid to take tough decisions. I'll give an example. In fact, I missed that lesson completely. Despite the risk of backlash and waning popularity, my focus at the university was to ensure that it could fulfill its mandate. One of the difficult things that I had to do was to establish who qualifies to be a leader of the SRC. And I put two criteria: that for you to be eligible to be a leader in our SRC, firstly, you must be taking a full load. You can't be taking 2 courses. Secondly, in the full load that you took last year, you must have passed all the courses. And of course, my fight with the people who were leading at the point was they wanted it to be 50%. I said, how can you lead if you have failed half of your courses? Part of being a leader is being a role model. In fact, you are academically precarious. You need to use all the time to get to the right footing as far as your academic project is concerned. So that was the lesson. Don't be afraid of taking tough decisions.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'm so glad that we went back to lesson number 13. It's one of the core skills and attributes of a leader. Just to bring the 15 points together, leadership is who you are, what you do, and how you think. And so there are a number of questions and comments that are raised in the QA box. Let me hand over to Principal just for a minute while I check them, and then I will come back and raise them to you, Prof. Principal, you have some comments?
Yes, no, thanks, Prof, for that intervention. Maybe 2, questions for you. In the you quoted one of the leading Chinese thinkers, Eric Lee, who is a fellow of the National School of Government, with whom yourself and former President Motlanthe had an engagement with 18 months ago. In one of his conversations, he raises the issue that he says China succeeds because of government, and India succeeds in spite of government. And that in the manner in which Indian society is organized, people are doing things for themselves. What will be your take on that, and what will be the lessons for South Africa in that regard? Should we, if those who lead public institutions, if I use your words, lead them without reading, and thus leading them into temptation and leading people into poverty, what then happens to society?
Yeah, no, I think this is an important point, but I don't actually agree with Lee. I don't agree with Lee when he says that India succeeds because in spite of government. One of the biggest successes of India is the successes of its educational infrastructure. There is a group of universities called the IITs that was created by Nehru. Nehru actually came up with the concept of IITs, Indian Institute of Technology, which is a group of universities. Now they are about 16. I just hear that they are exporting one to Dubai, that has been so successful that the US Congress even passed a vote of thanking them for the work that they've done. Of course, we know that the CEO of Facebook was a student at IIT, and the former CEO of Twitter was a student at IIT, and so on and so forth. But it's educational infrastructure. The CEO of Microsoft was a beneficiary of that. Now you say, okay, yeah, maybe that was good for American economy and not good for the Indian economy. No, India is the biggest recipient of outsourcing from United States. And I can tell you, if those people who were educated in India were not there, you probably would not even have Infosys. You probably would not have this huge outsourcing that is happening in India, that we are used to it. Now, let's come to the question itself. Why is it necessary to get the people that actually know to lead us, especially at the government level, at the administrative level? It's because the problems that we are facing today are just simply complex. And part of the reason why China has been successful is because of its attitude towards learned leaders, which I will give credit to Confucius himself, thousands of years ago, when he introduced the civil service exams that the world copied. England actually copied it. It never came to South Africa because of the Anglo-Boer War. The Afrikaners felt that if you introduce a civil service exam, it will be a mechanism of excluding them from government jobs. And the English-speaking people who were by then better educated than the Afrikaners were going to be the main beneficiaries. So when you have a problem with ESCOM, you need engineers to fix it. When you have a problem with potholes and dams, you need civil engineers to fix it. When you have problems in our hospitals, we need health economists to fix it. If you get less than that, your solution is going to be less optimal than if you had people who actually had a better understanding of the problem at hand.
Well, but Prof, in many instances, we make excuses in the public sector in particular, and argue that maybe there are no skills that we can't get the right people who are willing to sweat. And I asked this question to Minister Mamoloko Kubai recently when she called us to induct the boards of the public institutions, public entities that she leads as a minister. And I said to her, where do you get all these people? Because oftentimes we are told that there are no capabilities available.
Well, to be honest with you, just to give you an example, when Patrice Lumumba became president of the Congo, and this is the story that is not told, there were less than 10 university graduates in the Congo. The DRC is bigger than Western Europe. There were less than 10. That's incredible. Now, when we look at the failures, we can blame all the failures to the Belgian, to the CIA, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is the Congo was a sitting duck with less than 10 graduates. It was going to be a playground of one form of power, not even a sophisticated power, and another, Then you come to South Africa. South Africa has educated people. When I was growing up, I still remember when the first person in my village to get a BA degree. We have engineers now. There is no single discipline that you're not going to find South Africans in their numbers. What we need to do is to go and identify them. And that is where the Chinese leadership, we can learn from China. China goes there and identifies those people who are skilled and recruit them into the Chinese Communist Party, and groom them for leadership. Are we doing that? No, we're not doing that. Here, it's not necessarily a good lesson, but I just read a book called The Super Afrikaners, which is a book about the Broederbond, how they used to recruit people, that almost 25% of them were teachers, which constituted the largest group of people, because teachers were considered the learned people who are going to spread the idea of learning, So we just need to go there. I will only believe that there are no people the moment I see our top DGs in our universities engaging the vice chancellors and saying, give me the list of your top 10 mechanical engineering students, top 10 accountants. I want to give them a 3-month internship, a 1-month internship, so that when they graduate, they will consider working for me. Then I will know that we are working. But unfortunately, I never had such an encounter.
No, let me hand back to you, Program Director, Ms. Le Pen. I see Minister Kubai has joined. She's got a question for you, and you also have a question from Ms. Phoebe Potgieter and others, and the Program Director will give them an opportunity to ask you these questions directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Aweni. Can I welcome Minister Kubai to ask a question, please, Minister, if you'll unmute, and welcome to our session.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning, Minister.
Insights. Great insights as usual. Good to always listen to you. The issue I'm asking, how is UJ dealing with issues around student support? You talk about leadership and you've been able to explain how you've been able to support student leaders, how you've been able to get students engaged. But many times in universities, we find that the issues of mental health becomes a challenge. And if I'm not mistaken, University of Johannesburg has been one of the institutions that has low levels, or if I've not heard of high levels of student suicide. And I thought, maybe if you can share, what is it that either is it the environment, or am I correct, firstly, in assuming that UJ has that high level, low level of student suicide, especially in your tenure? And what has been the tactics, or what have been the methods that the leadership of UJ has put in place that created a conducive environment for students that would be able to see the level of how they're able to come out producing more PhDs, producing more postgraduate, but the pressures have literally not been the same of what we see across. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Minister. So, I mean, I think you're right. The level of suicides is actually relatively low. It's not absent, but it's very low. Because the University of Johannesburg is actually a large university. People don't realize that. It has 50,000 students. 20,000 more students than the University of Cape Town, for example. 15,000 more students than the University of Witwatersrand. So what have we done? I think there were a number of interventions that we have done. The first one is that we have something called PsyCAD, where we employ an army of people who specifically deal with issues of mental wellness. And one of the things that I always say when I go and visit students is that you are your sisters and your brother's keeper. When you see signs that somebody is not well, we will have places where you are supposed to report the incidents to us. You can even do it anonymously so that we can be able to intervene. Then the second thing, source of strength of mental well-being is actually the livelihood of people. You would have students who come to campuses and they don't have food to eat. And of course, for us, we identify such a group not as the lowest, not as people who are on NAFSAs because they have allowances, but people who are in the missing middle are the ones who were starving on our campus. And that is why we feed 3 times a day those people who do not have food. It's actually free, or it's not free. We have to work for it. We work with Tiger Brands and so on and so forth to be able to feed our students. And then the third source of mental well-being is actually academic success. And one of the things that has happened over the period in which I was a vice chancellor is that the success rate of our undergraduate students actually moved from 85% to 87%, 87.5%, which is 88%. How did we achieve that? We employed an army of tutors. One of the things that we have at the University of Johannesburg is an army of tutors who are there to assist students. And we use technology to identify at-risk students so that we can be able to intervene before it becomes a big issue. Of course, there are other problems that we are still dealing with. The issue of substance abuse is a big issue that is still on the table of the incoming Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Prof. Marwala. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also welcome DG Edward Masui, HOD for Education in Gauteng, as well as Prof. Phoebe Potgieter, and as well as our DG from the Department of Tourism. Let me hand over to Prof. Potgieter to ask your question. We did see your comment in the QA box around another book in the making. Over to you, Prof. Potgieter. Prof. Potgieter, are you there?
Hi, good morning. I think you probably have the wrong Prof. Potgieter. This is just Phoebe Potgieter without the Prof. My name is Phoebe Potgieter and I am currently the General Manager of the ANC. Really interesting issues that was raised, and I certainly think that you need to write another book on leadership based on these lessons from UJ. But I just wanted to ask 2 questions, which I suppose is related. The first issue is you say about the right people in terms of competency, interest, as well as expertise. But often when you get into institutions, you have to work what you have. And how do you deal with that when the possibility of bringing in new people is not as possible as may have been the case in UJ? So that's my first question. The second one is the problem in public institutions of continuity. Years ago, I served on the board of SETA, the State Information and Technology Agency. And by the time, and this was probably, I think, 2011, 2012, there were about, if I'm correct, about 10. We were on the 10th CEO of the institution in a period of less than 5 years. The SABC, a same situation. So the question about, if you want to embed good practice, style of leadership, institutional culture, how is that possible if you don't have continuity in leadership, as we see in our institutions? I mean, if you have, for example, if you look at a Pan-African institution like the Ethiopian airline, one of the reasons why they were able to be as successful as they are has in part to do with the continuity of their leadership. I think the same CEO has been there for quite a number of years, and therefore could drive the vision, embed the culture, as well as some of the institutional practices. Thanks.
No. Thank you very much. I think those are important questions. The first one is on what do you do when you get people, when you come to an organization, you have existing people. I think you need to change the people. One of the things that we have done at the University of Johannesburg was to actually make it mandatory that you must have a master's degree. You know, and I remember when we had to take people to the disciplinary process because they had not achieved this master's degree. When we introduced these people, says you're going to run into a problem with the law, but it turns out that no, as long as you can demonstrate that a person needs to have a certain level of competency to be able to do their work, you can, and you give them adequate support, and we gave them adequate support. We gave them money to be able to go and register for these courses. And so we just need to give them developmental milestones and say, this is what your job requires. This is the competency that you require. These are the gaps that exist between what you have and what you need to have in order to reach a certain level of competency. You give them a time frame. You negotiate with the unions. We negotiated with the unions, our local unions, and then you can be able to change them, you know. And then having things like what we are having today is another way of changing people, you know. As part of our performance agreement, you must go and attend so many courses. Professional organizations are doing. I'm a professional engineer, and for me to retain my status, I have to attend certain courses, because if I don't, I am not going to be considered to be competent in engineering, in the engineering field I am. Now, on the issue of continuity, and I was one of the lucky ones when I was on the board of CETA, we only had 2 CEOs, and I'm sure you are counting 2 of that. One of them was Mavuso Msimang, who was there for 3 years, and it probably is the longest, one of the longest serving CEOs of CETA. And 3 years is not a long time. 4 years is not a long time. You know, complex jobs require you to be there for a longer time. You often spend only the entire first year just understanding what the job is all about. And we need to put systems into place to ensure that there is no revolving chairs when it comes to leadership. I always feel that it's sometimes better to work to transform the existing leader you have than to change, especially if you have been changing leaders every year in the last 10 years. So we need to find ways of doing that. And of course, it's not only CETA. ESCOM has had more than 10 CEOs in the last 12 years. And I can assure you, if Google can have 10 CEOs in 10 years, it will cease to exist as a company. And our organizations are not special. You know, you need continuity in leadership, and we need to put, and of course, when you're working in a political environment, it's much, much more complex and so on and so forth. But it has to be part of the prescripts of the deployment committee, for example, that we have to get people who are going to be in the jobs long enough to ensure that they are effective, because if they are only there for a short period of time, they are not going to be effective. Thank you.
Can I invite Mr. Masui to ask his question? Over to you, Mr. Masui. Mr. Masui, it's hard to hear you. Are you there? Kulsum, can you just check for me, please? Prof, I'm not sure if you can hear him. I can't hear Mr. Masui.
I can see that he is unmuted, but he seems to be having a problem with his audio.
Okay, Mr. Masui, we'll come back to you. Can I ask DG Third Age of the Department of Tourism maybe to ask your question, sir? Mr. Victor, DG of Tourism, are you there?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, Prof, and good morning to all the attendees. Good morning, Minister. I had put the question on the chat because I've got a bit of challenge with connectivity. But essentially, if you look at Prof's history, he's a product of specialized schools, which were purely based on merit. So when he did his high school, he went to one of those schools. But if you look at what we are sort of doing now, that merit-based policy for enrollment of learners that probably would go on to achieve much greater things like Prof seems to have taken a backseat, and we kind of focus now on geographic proximity to the location of that particular institution or that particular school. What impact does this actually have in terms of somewhat robbing us of the opportunity to actually develop more like yourself, Prof? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I actually went to a public school called Mbiri, which was absolutely a fantastic school, one of those schools. I always say that out of my class came the editor of City Press, Katuma Maila, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, and the CEO of General Electric, amongst many, many other people. Now, why does smart people or motivated people not perform as well if they are put in an environment where people do not have the necessary work ethic? And by the way, I'm in Asia now. I'm in China. I'm in Japan. And if you go to Japan and China, you know that they select which high school you go to. Their entire educational system is based on, your competence, and based on your competence, you go to certain schools. The Germans have the technical schools and the gymnasiums. The students who are doing well, they go to gymnasiums. The students who are not doing well academically, they go to technical schools. And the outcome is actually quite good, because those people who go to technical schools actually make good living. They just play to their strengths. I think it's a wasted opportunity that we do not have schools that identify people with certain talent for certain subjects. If you're good in humanities, there should be special schools in humanities. If you're good in technical stuff, there should be special schools in technical education. And if you're good in mathematics and science, Mbiri was a mathematics and science school, we should be driven there. I think it's a lost opportunity, and ultimately we are going to lose people whom we are not supposed to lose. The beauty about Mbiri was that it was a completely government school. You paid the same amount of tuition fee as, I think it was like 2 rands or something, as any other school. The class dimension of the school was completely, you will get the poorest and you will get the richest person in the neighborhood, So I think that is a strategy that you need to rethink about. But I also must add that you do have an almost selective, not selective, the Dinaledi schools, where you identify certain schools because of their performance in mathematics and invest resources to those schools. And I think what you need to do is to try to get people who are going to motivate each other to go to those schools and who have the competencies, so that we can produce those necessary expertise that we need for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's try Mr. Masui again. Edward Masui, are you there, sir? Mr. Masui, are you there? No. Prof, we have a number of questions.
I see that here on the platform, it shows that he has the video, but he does not have the microphone. So the device he's using may have a disabled the microphone. So yeah, we can move to another person.
I just want to indicate, ladies and gentlemen, that there are a number of questions in the chat and in the QA. And so we will provide responses to it, as well as a copy of the recording and transcript. So we'll make it available to you if Prof is not getting to all the questions in the chat as well. Principal, is there anybody else that we need to lift up today?
Yeah, there's a question from Atta Malgas. I don't know if he can be able to speak. Atta and Nomonde. Atta, Nomonde, and Isaac. Atta, Nomonde, and Isaac, in that order, if we can allow them to speak.
Thank you, Prof. I'm not seeing Arthur in our panel. Arthur, are you there, sir? Can you unmute? Mr. Malgas?
Okay, thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning, Prof, and all the dignitaries. I just posed a question in the chat, also connectivity issues. But Prof, I was hoping that somewhere, somehow, you would touch on this with my previous personal experience as an undergrad student at UJ, and from what I think I'm observing currently, it was on the issue of our, just as a history as a country, in terms of certain sectors and industries being dominated by certain genders as within the working areas and the fields. So my question was actually based on, are there any intentional mechanisms that UJ currently has put in place to look into the issue of transformation in terms of student success rates, the throughput, if you had to analyze it per historic or backgrounds, gender along those lines and racial lines, and even staffing levels? Are there any mechanisms that UJ has really took time to focus in this area during your tenure, based on some of the specific faculties or departments to an extent? And in your view, whether you feel that the university as a whole, if it has been particularly looking at this matter, if there's any improvements that you would say, or if it's doing well, actually. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I mean, I've already indicated the issue of success rates, which is actually quite high, one of the highest in the country of universities. When it comes to the let's just look at class of our students. 75% of UJ students who are graduating are actually the first time in their families to come to university. It's actually, I mean, I'm including even siblings now, you know, about 75%, which is actually a very high number, you know. So from an inclusion perspective, we're quite impressed. When you come to the gender, obviously the majority of our students are female, you know. Where we lack is on the professorate, the academics, the professorate level. The number of women is less than men, and this is something that we have to work on, and we are working on. And me personally, I have my family donated R1 million to a scholarship that specifically targets women who are interested to do postgraduate studies in engineering related fields. But it's a journey that needs to be intensified. I couldn't be able to achieve it. We made progress, but certainly that is not where we are supposed to be. The general staff is fine. You know, the majority are female, but when we come to the professorate, which is the higher level of academic staffing, more work still needs to be done. When we come to the racial composition of our student bodies, UJ has actually become, the percentage of white people at UJ is roughly 5% in terms of students. And obviously they will be in certain, disciplines, in the medical sciences and in the accounting and engineering. So we need to, and of course we would like UJ to be a much more diverse university than it is. We believe that good education means you should be in a classroom with somebody who looks different from you. That is what good education is all about. And we'll need the next vice chancellor will need to work hard to make it much more like that. They used to be Adam Abib when he was at UJ. He always said that you have 10% mark. If you get number of white students to be less than 10%, then they start falling quite rapidly. And I think he was right. And we need to do that to make sure that we have a much more diverse student population than it is. At the staffing level, the majority of our academics are white. So we need to make sure that the transformational agenda is actually deepened. 20% of our staff are from outside South Africa, which is good because we also need to internationalize that cohort. But we need to bring more Black South Africans into the academy, and we have academic development project, accelerated academic development program to make sure that we bring as many Black South Africans into the academy as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. We've just got two more questions, Namonde and Isaac, and then we are going to wrap up our session today. Namonde, over to you, please. Ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, professors and all the attendees. I think mine, Prof, is more on, as a country, we currently are faced, amongst other challenges, with high unemployment, particularly within the youth group, and with a stagnant economy. So I wanted to check the institutions of higher learning. Have they done anything or working on something, some initiatives in terms of how they can influence the curriculum of both the basic education and your high school education? I'm saying this because I'm looking at the fact that we thrive as a country in terms of the mineral resources that we have as a country. However, what we do is we export them and then buy them back as finished products. And I'm thinking we're losing a high opportunity of developing skills, both production and professional skills around the whole value chain of the minerals that we have. And therefore, I'm thinking whilst tertiary institutions can do something, the interest and the education should start from the undergraduate levels. And then the second one is more aligned to this one, whereby there are a number of products and goods that we import as a country. And therefore, have we asked ourselves, why do we import those? And if they are contributing a lot in terms of our consumers' spend, how do we then develop skills so that instead of importing them, we can produce them locally, and thereby really making a dent in terms of growing our own economy and reducing unemployment? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I mean, those are the issues that we deal with. I mean, firstly, I would like to put it forward. Why has South Africa deindustrialized? And that is the question that we need to understand in order for us to get to beneficiate, to be able to produce goods that we can be able to sell domestically and we can be able to sell internationally. South Africa has actually deindustrialized because it is no longer competitive. You know, something as simple as a pair of shoes, which used to be made in Johannesburg at a place called Wallenfontein, where we have a campus as the University of Johannesburg. All that textile industry is gone. Why? Because the imports are simply cheaper than what we make here, you know. So we need to, if we are to reverse this deindustrialization, we need to focus on competitiveness. And that is why things like the fourth industrial revolution become very important. Because the production of today is no longer the same as the production of the shoes that I wore when I was in high school in the 80s. You have much more automation in the production in Asia, for example. That makes production much, much cheaper and make their goods more competitive. So we need to change the structure of our economy of production. Very, very important. At the University of Johannesburg, we have an institute on industrial policy that is dealing precisely with that, which is headed by Professor Fiona Tregener. You know, it's an example of the work that we are doing on that. Our strategy on the fourth industrial revolution focuses on how do we improve production. Now, when we come to what are we doing, UJ is probably the only university in South Africa where you can actually come in grade 0 and end after you have completed your postdoc. You can come to Funda Ujabula Ujabule, which is one of the best primary school that is located on our campus in Soweto, where nobody can actually be able to teach unless they have a master's degree. And there we are teaching kids robotics in Funda Ujabula. Of course, we run into problems with our staff who want to bring their own children, but we have a very strict criteria because what we want is to give the general public access to world-class education that is equivalent to the best private school, but at a government rate. Then we have a high school called UJ Metropolitan, precisely to deal with that issue. It is based in Auckland Park, one of the best high schools in Gauteng. Again, you go there, all the skills, soft skills, robotics, and all those, they are there. Then we have the Science Center in Soweto, where we employ the Dean of the Faculty of Science at Nelson Mandela University, used to be the head of our Science Center in Soweto. The function of a Science Center in Soweto is to ensure that the high schools in Soweto that needs advanced labs, they can come to our university and learn for free, tutorials and so on and so forth. It's extra to what they learn at school and with resounding successes. Then we have the Techno Lab. The Techno Lab is now teaching high school students, high school teachers, robotics. They were in Limpopo doing exactly that. So we are actually quite involved. And the research that we do on early mathematics education in Soweto, we have a such chair that is working on that. On science education across the board, also in Soweto, another such chair. So the work is there. What needs to happen is you as policymakers to read our research, to read some of the lessons that we have learned from Funda Ujabula and what we are doing there, and so on and so forth. When I went to Funda Ujabula, I went with the Chancellor, Dr. Pumzile Mlambo-Nyuka. So we arrived there, you have all these kids who are 7 years old. And then they start reciting the preamble of our constitution. I was really impressed. And for those of you who attended the inauguration of our Chancellor, we actually had a video of this 8-year-old, 7-year-olds reciting the preamble of the Constitution in its entirety, in unison. And I was saying to myself, how many of our professors can recite that? How many of us who are sitting here can be able to recite our preamble? So that is the kind of citizenship that we require, that will be necessary for us to tackle the issue of development and ultimately employment, and it is happening at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you.
Prof, let's take a last question from Isaac, and then I'm going to ask our DDG to do the wrap up. Principal will also want to say a word or two. Isaac, please, your question.
Thanks, Chair.
Unmute, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just on a lighter note, because Prof in his input has covered me, my questions are going to be based on robotics and 4IR, but in his responses has covered me. But on a lighter note, taking advantage that I'm the last person, Prof, if you receive a call tonight, that you must be a minister of electricity, what will be your response?
My response will be like, I have a perfect candidate of somebody who could be a better minister of electricity than I am. that I could ever be.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you for the insights. Principal, I know you want to say a few words and then over to Pindi.
No, just to, personally thank you again, Prof, for coming here to engage with, us in the public sector who are here. There are some colleagues here who are not DGs or CEOs or HODs of their departments who may wish to have a parting shot from you, a word of inspiration. What should they look out for? How can they become diligent in the work that they do, whether they're a deputy director in a department or director or any other position? What will be your passing shot to everybody who is in the public sector, who is wondering whether or not it's possible to execute their responsibilities diligently?
Well, I would say that it is about people. Everything is about people. It's about serving the people. Societies that do not base their philosophies on serving the people ultimately collapse or fall into disrepair. So if we put people as a center of what we do, we will go and improve ourselves so that we can serve them better. We'll go and re-educate ourselves so that we can be able to serve them better. We'll respond to their needs and their issues faster. So go on and serve our people.
Thank you so much, Prof. It's really inspired us. It was very interesting to listen to you as a leader and as I'm growing into my role. I learned quite a lot in the 15 points that you talked about here, and it will be a lot for us to learn and live through them. I just want to quickly go over them just for the sake of someone that might have missed one or two. So these are around leading with diligence and what are the lessons that Prof has learned as a leader. Says the first one is the right people, having the right people and making sure that they have the diverse skills that you would need. Building financial resources, number 2. Number 3 was making sure that you invest in your on building internal capacity. So invest in the people that you already have within the organization. 4thly was to invest in infrastructure, build, create new things. On some of us, it will be more like your technology that you need to invest in. Number 5 was talking to inculcate sustainable mindset. That is very key. How to make sure this thing carries on when you are not there as well, and people that are working with you. Number 6, being relevant, making sure that you're building a relevant organization to its local environment, as well having an international outlook and encouraging collaboration, working with others. And number 7 was reading. Very important, reading and sharing what you are reading with others. Number 8 was lead by example. So everyone must learn from you, walk the talk, basically. Number 9 was constant communication. You cannot lead in isolation and people don't know what you're doing. Communicate with those that you are leading so they know what is happening. Number 10, lead based on your expertise. This, for me, talked a lot to say that we each have something to give. So use your talents, use what you know in order to do much better, do greater good. 11, think out of the box, don't be boxed. Always try and do something, be innovative in how you're dealing with things. Number 12 was talking to perma-crisis, but making sure that you always have a strategy on how to arrest those crises and prevent them where possible. 13 was saying, do not be afraid to take tough decisions. You're not going to be popular, but you're a leader. And you need to be able to do that. 14 was that you must host prominent events, decision makers like NSG is doing, bringing you to us today to inspire us. This is very great for all of us that are benefiting. Number 15 is learning from others. There's other nations, there's other organizations, other people, like we've learned from you today. I want to thank you so much, Prof, for this service that you've given. You've shown us that it's so important to be of service to others. Your last part in short was talking about you need to make sure that we're looking at how can we serve others. And you've done that so well, and you've made sure that you lead with purpose, and you've put us on the map as Africans, as South Africa, where you're going now. You know, we all take your success as our own because we identify with you. We're so happy for this, and we wish you all the success in your new role, and we're looking forward to still engaging with you. We know this is not the last time that you'll come to the NSG to share your wisdom, to share your knowledge, to share the groundbreaking things that you're doing so that all can benefit from what you're doing. And we want to also thank everyone that has attended this masterclass. These are the kind of things that the NSG is doing to try and empower all public servants, and even the public sector that joins us. They learn from the things that we provide as the NSG. Make sure you stay in touch with us. Look at our website, look at the different programs that we're rolling out, and enroll. And the master classes are free. We always bring such important keynote speakers like Prof. Maurala, and we want to thank you all for attending. And thanks, Prof. We want to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.